Bueno, buenas tardes a todos. Estamos en un nuevo Participa en Vivo organizado por la Asociación OCRE. Recordamos que eh, las normas de este Participa en Vivo, que estáis con micrófono y con cámara en abierto. Y tenemos a GROSHELL, que ahora os voy a presentar, que es un invitado de lujo. Y recordaros eso, que la primera parte nos va a hacer una introducción, pero luego podréis interactuar y hacerle todas las preguntas que queráis, ¿vale? Entonces voy a introducir al invitado de hoy. El doctor Jacques Grosel es profesor, coach de instrucción y consultor educativo. Tiene su sede en Seattle, en el estado de Washington, en el noroeste de Estados Unidos, y trabaja con escuelas a nivel nacional e internacional para desarrollar una instrucción de calidad basada en la ciencia de cómo se aprende, cómo aprenden los alumnos. Jack comenzó su carrera en educación como maestro de educación primaria. Tras unos años enseñando en diversas escuelas y diferentes contextos, se interesó cada vez más en lo que las investigaciones educativas han demostrado que funciona y bueno, pues ahora se dedica plenamente a ello. Eh, Zach tiene un podcast con un título bastante curioso que es Progressively Incorrect, que sería como progresivamente incorrecto, es un poco de juego de palabras, y está muy activo en Twitter con el alias Mr. Zach G. Tiene un blog también que se llama Education Rickshaw, que es de su época que estuvo en la India, que bueno, luego él igual nos lo dijo, nos lo explicará un poco mejor. Y el motivo principal por el que lo hemos invitado es porque es autor de un maravilloso, un magnífico libro que se titula Just Tell Them, que se traduciría al español como simplemente díselo a los alumnos. Y el subtítulo es The Power of Explanations and Explicit Teaching, que sería el poder de las explicaciones y la instrucción explícita. ¿Eh? So, Zach, I'll give you, we are all yours from now on, okay? We are ready to listen to you. And go ahead, please.
Perfect. Okay. Um, Let me get started then. So, I really appreciate you all being here. Could we have just there's a couple people that need to be muted. If they could mute your sound, please. And then, as you can see, once I get started, as you can see, I have put this in Spanish, and I hope it's okay. This was actually presented in Research Ed Chile. And so it's for a presentation in Chile. I hope it's all correct for you. And on your screen, you'll have some Spanish, and also I'll be speaking in English. Yes, my name is Zach Groshell, and I'm as the introduction said, I began as an elementary school teacher, and right now I work with schools all around the world to focus on really great, structured, and precise, explicit teaching. And this is my book, and it is going to be translated in Spanish. It's in the process of being so I'm excited about that. And it's all about how to teach better, how to teach and explain and model a lot better. So, when I was just beginning teaching, uh, this was kind of the straw man or the caricature of what a lot of people said that that sort of traditional forms of teaching look like. We don't want kids to be in rows. We don't want kids to be bored. We don't want them sitting in desks and the teacher is talking. It's very, very boring. And I understood that and I took that into heart. One of the things that I heard very early on were things like this, right? From my professors when I was in university. Um, Things like this. Maybe you've heard this one before. And then also, this one's kind of interesting. Um, when I was first teaching, this was kind of how I was brought up into education. It was very important that the teacher minimize their teacher talk and not try to make it better necessarily, but to try to give students more autonomy and more control over the learning. And there are parts of this that are very true, right? A lot of what we went through in school was boring. We had teachers who droned on and lectured in sort of a long-winded way. And when you go into university settings, a lot of times you have these boring kind of professors who explain things through PowerPoint, and they never really allow you to engage with the topic. They never have you talk about it with somebody. They never have you write anything down. And so this was sort of the beginning of my career, was hearing things like this. And then I sort of took all of these lessons in my own classroom and I went the other direction. We also heard things like this: school is like a prison, and and we have to make sure that school is more fun, more engaging, more exciting. And so these are three pictures from my own classroom. I'll let you just take a look. The one on I'm not sure which is more dangerous of each of these different activities. This one over here, the kids are obviously cutting things, which is fine. These kids are soldering metal together with this right here. This is perhaps the most dangerous one for parents. If you know this, as a parent, I walk around in my house at night and I step on one of these Legos. It hurts quite a bit, right? But these are all just kind of fun activities. The these are pictures I show you from my own classroom because I was always trying to decenter myself and not focus on the job of teaching the kids stuff. It was really important that the kids have a lot of agency as they did these different projects. Um, this picture I put right here is from one of my students, and this is a student in second grade who couldn't read, uh, couldn't write, couldn't solve basic math problems, had a hard time fitting in, a lot of different issues with behavior and with reading, writing, and math. And this is one of the projects that she made. She made a bracelet. This it took her about, well, it took her several months to make this bracelet that I found. And this was during time that could have been dedicated towards more rigorous instruction, time on task, time learning how to read the squiggles on the page. In English, when you learn how to read when you learn how to read phonetically, it's very challenging. Unlike Spanish, where you can pick it up very quickly, we spend a lot of time teaching the phonetic code of how to decode all of our different letters. And she needed more time doing that. And what we were doing in my class was a lot of this activity-based type of teaching. The kids are in groups doing projects, and I'm walking around and I'm looking at them and I'm observing them. And really, I don't know what they know and what they've learned, and I don't have any plan in place for how to help kids like her who are struggling. I still feel a little bit embarrassed looking back at my first beginning teaching. I sort of was turning the classroom into a place of that was more probably suitable for an after school program or maybe for a summer program, but not certainly not that supports kids like her, kids like Fiza, kids like Ikaika and Hector, kids in my class who really needed the structure to learn. And at the same time, I wasn't helping the kids on the high end either, because the high performing kids could have benefited from more direct and explicit instruction, but perhaps at a faster pace. Um, I look back at all these things and it just sort of doesn't really matter unless you think about what does the evidence suggest around direct, explicit instruction, structured teaching that starts with the goal of the instruction in mind and it involves a teacher modeling the material, having the students practice the material, working together with the teacher to develop our skills explicitly, directly, and systematically. What does the evidence suggest for this type of methodology? Well, I always like to begin with this slide here, which comes from, it's called Project Follow Through. It was a research study in the United States that took place from 1967 to 1977. I'll give you a chance to read what's on your screen before I talk about it. A couple of things to explain here about this research study. This was the most expensive research study in the history of education, and it still is probably never going to be surpassed. It was a huge experiment that happened in the United States for 10 years, and it involved comparing different models of education. All of these different models involved different methods. And if you look here on the zero, you automatically notice that this right here in the middle was students who did not undergo any of these models. They were just tested. So we can compare the students who received a different type of instruction to the students who were just tested and got regular business as usual typical instruction. And if you notice, there's all of these lines going up here and all of these lines going down here. Right here is the only approach of the research and project follow through that had a significant impact on student outcomes. And that program was called direct instruction, or enseñanza directa, right? Was the name of the program. This program involved very careful presentations, very careful modeling. The students practice what the teacher models. The teacher involves the student in lots of questions about the material and slowly takes away the supports so that students can do the task by themselves. And then there were tests to ensure that the student learned the material. That was called direct instruction. These other approaches down here in the research, they ultimately failed students because, as you can see, it would have been better if the students had not been in the research, if they had simply just gone on with their normal studies and had not been subjected to these particular models of instruction. These programs like Educación Abierta or open education, these approaches involved a lot of play, a lot of discovery, a lot of activities and open-ended learning, lots of doing projects and working on things with your hands. And as you go up through here, you notice that the more structured the approach to teaching, the better the learning was. But not only the learning, as you can see, there is academic learning in dark blue, but also in problem solving. Where students think critically and creatively. People always ask me this, why would it be that the direct instruction approach would have better outcomes in problem solving? Well, it's because they were taught better, right? They were taught in a structured and a systematic way, and students learned the foundational skills that were necessary to enable them to produce problem solving skill and creativity skill and critical thinking skill. The other thing people always notice is this red right here. The students in direct instruction also exceeded the other groups when it came to how the students felt about their learning, how they felt about themselves. I am smart. I can do this. I'm capable of doing hard things. The students in the direct instruction approach outperformed everyone else on this measure. Why? Like, isn't direct instruction boring and doesn't it make kids feel bad about themselves? Well, no, not necessarily. The students felt better about themselves because they were learning, because they could see that they were successful. When you feel successful, you end up attributing the success to yourself rather than blaming other people or blaming yourself. And so what we saw in Project Follow Through was a very clear pattern of the structured direct instruction approach exceeding all of these outcomes against all of these other uh, types of instruction, which these types of instruction were meant to boost the folks' self-esteem, but they really didn't because the kids weren't really learning, right? Um, I but let's keep on going. Like we think about direct instruction and how it was expressed in Project Follow Through. This was followed up by another series of studies that lasted from the 80s and the 90s, and many of our best research came from this line of research, which was the actions of the most effective teachers. Acciones de los docentes más efectivos. We're talking about that we would observe the most effective teachers and we would see what are they doing? What do they do every day? And they found this pattern that I put on your screen that most of the teachers with the best test scores and the kids learn the most, they tended to do these things. I'll allow you to read. Now, this pattern of the most effective teachers perfectly fits with what we saw over here. How the direct instruction model uh, was designed was through uh, these same sets of techniques. And so, one set of research that happened in the 60s and 70s was perfectly confirmed by the research that took place in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Um, that that the best teaching involves a level of instructional design that includes modeling and practice and feedback, the teacher helping the students, preparing the students, and slowly allowing the students to do things independently. This was confirmed again in a different decade with a different set of research. And moving forward, even into the 2000s, this is a very famous paper that many people have cited, and the title is "Why Minimal Guidance During Instruction Doesn't Work." And this was the abstract translated in Spanish. I'll let you read it for yourself. Now, I hope I gave you enough time. Now, uh, this paper was basically reporting on all of the all of the research that had come up to this point in 2006 around how uh, direct instruction, explicit instruction, has always been found to be a superior method to these methods of open-ended learning, inquiry-based learning, project-based learning, teaching methods that really place a lot of emphasis on students leading the learning and guiding themselves versus methods in which the teacher is guiding the process and fully organizing and making sure in a structured way that students learn the material that they're supposed to learn. And they made a very interesting argument in this paper. They were saying that it's not just that these other methods don't work, it's that they don't work because they're designed uh, in ways that are not that don't fit how children learn. Children learn through a specific cognitive architecture that requires direct and explicit instruction when students are learning something new. And as they learn that thing, you can slowly take away the supports and allow them to do things independently. But if you don't do that, you're going to overwhelm or frustrate the student by giving them far too much information to do by themselves. And so when they do it by themselves, they're going to try to figure it out. They're going to struggle to figure it out, and they're going to lose a lot of motivation, and they're not going to learn as much. How children learn is, in fact, very important for how we teach. And so, how do we teach, and what have we learned about teaching? We've learned that the role of guidance, of direct instruction during the process is extremely important. That's what the paper said. And it confirmed this research and it confirmed this research. You can see that we see a pattern here of all of these areas of research supporting a very general idea that teachers should lead the learning and slowly take away the supports so that students can be independent by themselves. Now, um, in this paper, they talk about this thing that I call the bottleneck, and it's in my book. I talk about it a lot, which is that all of us have this structure in our mind called working memory or memoria de trabajo, right? And the working memory here is like a bottleneck in that if I it's very limited, this space. When I'm trying to learn something, I can't just have a huge project or a huge task that I have to take on because there's so many different components to it. If it's not broken down and carefully given to me, I'm going to struggle in this working memory space to retain or remember anything that's occurring. And so the ultimate point of education, though, is to take information that you learn from outside of you, like this, 1/5 plus 3/4. I give you a problem like this. You put it in your working memory. Working memory is very, very limited, and I have to struggle to try to make sense of it. And then ultimately, if I tune into it and it's not too overwhelming, I can transfer that information into my long-term memory. But basically, if we're not careful with how we design instruction, it's easy to clog up working memory and make it so kids don't learn very much, right? So looking at the research around this, if I give students group number one, lots of problems to solve, and then I look at group number two and I give them models or examples where I slowly myself demonstrate the material. What ends up happening from this style of researching this problem is that students in this group end up learning it much more efficiently. They learn it faster. They also tend to learn when you're giving them the model more effectively. They can retain it on tests later on, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, and so on. And we also know, looking at this type of research, that providing students with these models, actually demonstrating it to students, it ends up lowering their feeling of anxiety, their feelings of, is it me? Am I stupid? Do I not know how to do this? But providing models in this way has always demonstrated a stronger effect for modeling and providing the information up front so that students can use that information in future problems. This, by the way, is the focus of this book right here, and the focus of my dissertation, my PhD dissertation, was around the evidence base around how to effectively model and explain things to kids. So, I mean, I often ask people at this point, like, isn't this just common sense, right? Where if I'm teaching anything, I'm teaching swimming, um, I would not start by taking the child and throwing them into the deep end of the swimming pool, right? They will drown. So the risk is too great. So what I instead will do is I start on the wall right here, like this teacher is, and we slowly but surely put the students in to greater depths of the swimming pool, and we involve, I hold them with my hand, I move their arms, we practice together, and eventually you're going to be swimming by yourself. It would be absurd to think that we should put the same child just directly in the deep end and have them just kind of drown. It would just frustrate them. They would lose a lot of motivation. And in fact, that's kind of how education has taught me to teach, which is give them lots of problems, get them lots of things to do, get the kids discovering and doing. And in the end, what I saw with my own students was a lot of frustration, a lot of, I don't understand this, and not a lot of learning. We need to think more in terms of this structure, this sequence. We need to think about the sequencing of how we teach things in a much better way. So, moving forward, there was sort of there are different ways that you can kind of shift towards a more explicit or direct approach. There are ways to make classrooms a lot more in line with the evidence around direct and explicit instruction. I'll talk about a few of them here for the rest of this presentation. Here are the few. I'll let you read your screen. I wonder which of these is most interesting to you? Which of these kind of gets you most excited, right? Um, we'll start here at this first one, and we'll kind of work our way through to the next ones. Um, Obviously, clarity, right, is important in teaching. And in fact, they've done a lot of really great research around clarity. Like they'll give students a very confusing sounding lecture, a very confusing sounding teaching condition, and then they'll compare it to teaching that is more straightforward, more streamlined. You just explicitly say just the words that you say. Well, what happens, as this image shows, is that the cognitive load of the presentation is lowered when just the words that need to be said are presented, right? This is obvious, but what do we do as teachers, right? As teachers, we need to make sure we practice what we're going to say ahead of time, that we really think through what are the things that I need to teach today. You can't teach too much. I mean, I think of all of these different teachers that I've had who go off on this story and this tangent, and they explain everything about the topic, and kids are just learning something new. We have to be very careful to be very explicit and direct and just use the words that are needed to be used. The I think about in terms of also about visuals and how we use visuals in tandem with what we say. This text right here, go ahead and read it. I wonder if you know what he's saying. It's a bicycle pump. You know, one of those bicycle pumps where you pump up the tire and then you make, that's what he's talking about. Really, the evidence suggests that just talking, just standing up and talking is less effective than if I pair what I'm saying with the appropriate visual, right? I stand there and I present and I point and I explicitly talk about the diagram. This is going to make the information more permanent and allow the students to really hone in on the important ideas. So we know that, but it's also important, just like with our words that we talked about over here, it's also important that we don't just include unnecessary things on our presentations, that everything that we do it goes into working memory, and we have to make sure we're not just like inundating, flooding them with tons of new things. So we have to be careful just to put the things that they need to see on our presentations. And similarly, we see a lot of presentations that involve far too much text, long forms of text in the presentation. The children can't deal with all of this competing information. I'm going to read this. I'm going to look at you. I go back and forth, and I have to read this, and I have to look at you, and it's very it can overwhelm. It's just unnecessary information. Being very clear and explicit with how we speak and what we put on the board is important. Other research just shows the difference between these two conditions, where the teacher really needs to lead it, making sure to focus kids' attention on the parts that they need to talk about, pointing and explaining, using great visuals, and having a conversation with their students, but in a very carefully controlled way. More recent research, too, shows that just even the diagram uh, is useful, but it might even be better if we just drew it, because if you just drew it on the board, because think about it. I put this large diagram on the board and the children have to look at all the different parts of the diagram, where if I draw one part at a time and stop, I'm just presenting just a little bit of information at a time. All of this fits in with working memory and cognitive load. How do we present things in a way that it's just systematic and careful and precise? Because otherwise students won't learn the material. They'll be we've overcomplicated it when we're not being very careful about the instructional design of our presentations. Um, in the same light, making sure that when we're modeling things, we're doing it in very small, discrete steps. We often overestimate how much students can handle at one time. And so we talk, 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 and we don't break it down into smaller parts and then involve the student in practicing and rehearsing those smaller parts, right? So thinking about this area of research, it fits into the same thing. We have our working memory, we have our long-term memory, and I talk and I say all of these things right here. Go ahead and read what's on your screen. I mean, would anyone here understand any of that if I just said it all at once? I just talked and talked and talked. This is not explicit and direct instruction. This is just someone coming unprepared and who doesn't know how to teach, just talking at students, right? Explicit and direct instruction involves small step presentations. And so I could take, each, of course, they're going to get overloaded by this very thing. What I can do is I can take apart that presentation and I can alternate using things like this that are on your screen. Lots of choral response where I say to the student, right, okay, so what is this? This is A, and I give the student an opportunity to respond, or I use a snap and I say, right, examine or not examine, it's examine. And I involve the students in a lot of back and forth choral response. Also making sure that I call on students very carefully. And I say a little bit, I call on a student. I say a little bit, I call on a student so that I can check and check and check that everybody in the classroom is understanding this, right? Using things like ensuring that they write in alternating fashion, that they use mini whiteboards to make sure I can check and see. I say, look at the class and I go 3, 2, 1, show me. And I move my neck around like this and I look at all of the students and I scan their answers. Okay, they got it. I can explain a little bit more. Um, this alternating pattern really fits into what we know about how do we get kids thinking. Like if I say this question right here on the board, folks, ¿Cuál es la capital de Sudan? I lived in Sudan. Paco, you said it was India. No, it was Sudan. It was Sudan when you were talking. Yeah. It's fine. And they had all of these rickshaws. That's where it came from. But if I say, Laura, ¿Cuál es la capital de Sudan? And what happens to all the rest of the kids in blue? Well, they're just going to let Laura answer. They're not going to think through the question. So I have to be very careful. I present a little bit, modeling in small steps, and then I shift how I ask the questions as well. Like if I said this, ¿Cuál es la capital de Sudan, Laura? Well, at least some of the kids heard the question, but Laura still is the only one that gets to answer. So what if I did this instead? I go, ¿Cuál es la capital de Sudan? Laura. In which case, at least everyone had the chance to think about the question. I've explained a little bit, and now it's their turn to answer. Laura gets a chance to respond, but we got everyone thinking. My goodness, it would even be more effective to think even greater than this. I say, class, what is the capital of Sudan? Put up my hands like this, and I go, and everybody responds. Or we take a mini whiteboard and we say, everybody, write the capital of Sudan on your mini whiteboard, and 3, 2, 1, show me. In which case, I can get everybody participating, everybody involved, and I can check that the students are getting it as I go. This is bread and butter, direct, explicit instruction. How to make sure that at every interval I'm checking that students are listening and understanding what I'm saying, right? So really, we need to start thinking about how we present in terms of alternation. It's like a tennis match. I pass it to you, you pass it to me. I make sure that we're doing this at a very brisk pace because students start to fall asleep, right? We need to make sure that everybody's involved. Um, we need to make sure that we're checking very frequently. And teachers often don't add this part to their repertoire. They talk, they give an assignment. They talk and they give an assignment, and really it needs to be far more interactive, right? And things like making sure everyone responds, not just the kid who raises their hand and says, I know the answer. That we don't want to follow the child who knows the answer. We want to check in on everybody. We teach everybody, not just the kids who are most confident, right? And then kind of this just, using this information. We get a lot of information from doing lots of serve and return, using that information to adjust the lesson, to check in on this kid. It provides us with a lot of really important information. So, how are we doing so far, Paco, on time? What time is it? What time is it for you?
Well, well, I think you still have three more points, right?
Yep, 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 yep. We're good. We're good. I'm just checking in, making
Go
sure we're
ahead.
all fine. Yeah,
We are
yeah, yeah.
enjoying. We are
Love it.
enjoying that.
Love it. As you sit here, everybody, and think about these different ideas, I want you to try to take away one or two things that you want to focus on with yourself, with other people, and what you want to remember out of this presentation is very important to me. I'm going to now talk about examples and non-examples, or ejemplos y contra ejemplos, and pardon my Spanish. Um, One of the things that we need to do is change traditional lecturing into one that's not just talking about it, but showing what it is. We have to be very careful that when we're presenting, that we don't just describe it, but we demonstrate what that thing is concretely. And that's where examples and non-examples come in. There's a great story that I always like to tell of the teacher who goes in front of his class and he says, Esto es glurm, and it's a fake word. Well, what happens when I say, this is glurm? Well, students might think that glurm means green. Students might think glurm means cloth. Students might think glurm means the action of waving or some combination of these things. One example of this is glurm or this is how do you do something is never sufficient. You always have to provide multiple examples and also multiple non-examples to illuminate what that thing is. And so a lot of the best research around explicit instruction begins with this premise. We have to be better at how we prepare our examples. When I was teaching third grade, I taught this thing right here. I went to my board and I drew on the line in the middle of a shape, and I said, this is a line of symmetry. Este es un eje de simetría, right? And I drew this line. And I said, okay, kids, do you understand? Great. Go and do it on your worksheet. What did the kids do? They just drew lots of lines on stuff in the wrong way. And this is typical of lots of teaching. Here's how you do it, but I don't show you how not to do it. I don't describe the boundaries of that concept, right? And so much better would be to do something like this. But of course, that's not enough because the shape is purple and the shape stays the same. I really need to go beyond this, right? And I need to provide slowly varying different examples to present to students so they really understand like the boundaries, the differences, the limits of each of the concepts, even probably in this sequence going towards things like this. And and how we design our examples is very important. One of the things that I notice with vocabulary instruction is a teacher will go like this at the front of the room and they'll say, "Does anyone know the word examine? What does the word examine mean?" And they look around. What happens? The kid who's most confident, who already knows the answer, she raises her hand. The teacher teaches just the student. Yeah, that's right. The rest of the kids don't really hear the definition that the child just said. The definition is not quite right, so there's a misconception there. And then there's no examples. Where the word examine, I can teach with examples and non-examples much, much easier. I say, so the word the day today is examine. What word? Examine means to look at carefully. What does examine mean? Kids say look at carefully. And then I go, okay, I'm going to say a series of sentences. And you're going to say examine or not examine. You're going to say examine or not examine. So Toby looked carefully at his plant and checked to see if it was healthy. Examine or not examine? You're right, examine. Well, Sarah listened to the birds. She listened with her ears to the birds. Did she examine or not examine? The kids say not examine. And I go through a series of examples and non-examples on my PowerPoint or verbally, getting everyone to respond using that alternating principle. Lots of choral response. How do you know, Sarah? How do you know, Toby? And I go around the room and I make sure I ask questions of everybody and I involve them in a series of examples as opposed to just the definition of the word or just what one child said for the word. I involve them in a series of examples and non-examples. I could talk about that all day, but let's go to like the final kind of bucket here, and that is that really explicit instruction involves a lot of time for the students to practice. And when they practice, we need to give them feedback so that students aren't practicing errors. A lot of times in education, we talk about drills and how this is going to be so boring for kids. Kids hate lots of practice and repetition. Well, maybe they do, but they also enjoy the success that comes from getting good at stuff. Like I always like to show this video as kind of an example. This child is doing she's practicing a skill. Watch her do this with a coach right nearby.
Confere. میتونیام فقط گفتیم باشه باشه اوکی برو Yeah! Yeah!
mean, that kind of feeling of success, that feeling that comes from lots of hard work, is something we need to kind of return, I think, to education in the sense that kids can do hard stuff and hard work and effort is important for learning. And we have to get kids to understand that practice makes perfect. And this is really the center of direct and explicit instruction is that the more you practice, and the more you're going to get better at things, and the less cognitive load each of those things is going to is going to burden working memory. So the more practice you get, the better. Here's an example of some of the things that we do, like lots of sort of practice quizzing or retrieval practice has been shown to be very effective. Where if you look at the graph here, what they do in this type of research is they give kids things like this, right? Lots of different types of practice activities, and then they compare two groups where one group is going to receive a lot more practice, the testing, where the other group is going to get just more studying. And you see where when we compare two conditions over time, the kids who got the testing or got this sort of like, requires them to dredge their long-term memory. And we ask kids lots of questions. We do lots of mini whiteboard work, lots of flashcards, that the kids who are in those conditions end up outperforming over time the kids that just get extra time to restudy. And this has been found many, many times. We think about the research on practice, and you can find a lot of different a lot of different sort of important things to think about, like the fact that kids need to learn things spaced out over time. We need to distribute practice over time so that kids get more and more practice, but we slowly, incrementally distribute it over time so that kids don't forget it, right? This is the famous forgetting curve, where if you learn something, you immediately start to forget it. But if I make you practice it again, you'll forget it a little bit less. And if we keep on practicing it over and over again, you don't forget it so much, right? This is a central tenet of direct instruction. And a lot of times when we plan our units, like this is topic 1, this is topic 2, this is topic 3, well, what's going to happen? The kids are going to forget everything, right? And so we make sure that we have opportunities for kids to practice past material. Something like this, where we ensure that we teach something and then a little bit of it comes back in the next unit. And we make sure that it keeps on coming back over and over and over again so that kids never really forget. Once I teach something, it's always going to come back again in a do now, in an exit ticket, in a practice quiz, in a flashcard. We're constantly spacing out and interleaving our practice. And this is some of the best programs, right, that exist out there. Like this is a program that teaches math, and what it shows here is precisely this. A student learns something in the program and it's spaced out over time. Or this, they get it every other day or every few days to make sure they don't forget it. This is the best instructional materials are designed with memory in mind. Kids are easily overloaded when they learn new things. When they have old things that they know, they need to practice it in spaced out intervals over and over and over again. In education, we've decided that practice isn't as nearly as important as we thought it was before. We need to bring back a layer of repetition. Kids need a lot of practice, or they'll become demotivated and they'll become overloaded. This kind of reminds me of my friend Marcy Steins. She's a collaborator. Or a lot of times I'll tell teachers, look at your calendar, space it out over time. But we also need to give teachers better materials that do this already. When we have a textbook or we have a resource, that resource should help teachers to have lots of practice that comes back again and again. This is a quote from my friend Marcy Stein. I'll let you read that. true, I mean, and truly this speaks to the importance of, if we're going to help teachers to deliver explicit and direct instruction, we need to also think about the materials that they use and make sure that these are helping teachers to provide sufficient practice of all the things that they're teaching, or kids are just going to forget it. And so, the final area, I thought the last one was the final one, but I forgot where I was. The real final area is around the fact that when I just tell you, when I teach you something, I model something, that's not the end. The end is you doing it by yourself and doing it independently. And the most important aspect, perhaps, of direct and explicit instruction is that slow release into independence, that gradual release. I we use the metaphor of scaffolding because it's important. When I'm building a building, we start by putting up lots of structures, and I model the material. I explain the material explicitly. I show what it is. I show what it isn't. I use examples and non-examples. I use visuals. But over time, we need to take away these supports and start asking more questions. Start having the students do the stuff by themselves. And this kind of fits into this this gradual release or scaffolded approach, where when students are just learning something new, they're novices. What do I need to do? I need to explain it to them. I need to show them how it works, model the process, explain the relationships between the material, give examples and non-examples. But as they become more and more expert, what I'm going to do is slowly fade away the supports. Like in this example, I've replaced the steps with questions. The kids themselves need to gradually show me they can do it. Mini whiteboards, choral response, cold calling around the room. Everybody stop and jot, and I check. Partners talk. And when I'm going around and I'm listening and I'm checking and I'm watching and I'm seeing, can everyone do this? And finally, they end up going ahead and they can do it by themselves. And that's really where the motivation comes in. I think of it sort of like when you're passing the baton. The teacher works to control the instructional design so that everything is set up for the student's success. And when I finally pass that baton to the student, I'm sure that they can do it by themselves. And when they do it by themselves, you get that feeling that that little girl had in jumping and jumping. Once you do it by yourself, you don't feel frustrated and overwhelmed. You feel supported and motivated to be your best self, right? And so, this is really the process. And again, if this feels like common sense, I think it should be. We talked about these things that were on your screen, and you can kind of see how if we started to emphasize these things, we started to really think hard about these things, that instruction would be much more responsive to how students learn. Working memory is very limited when you're learning something new. But once you know it, you can go and do really great and creative things about it. So we have to be very careful of how we design and practice and model to enable students to do things independently without frustrating them or without them not learning anything. So here's kind of my summary slide for you all. For where I live, going to university is very important. And where I live, it's very expensive to live here, to have a house here. It's, most of these houses here are close to $1 million if you want to live in a nice neighborhood in a nice house. And we really have to get this right, whether it's in Spain or whether it's in the United States. We have to get education right. And here's a few of the things that I know. The first is that there are significant disparities between students who have a lot of resources and students who don't in education. And for some students, it's especially difficult to be at school. School is not easy for many kids, and we can't engineer it so that it becomes way too difficult for anyone, right? Especially kids that we're really concerned about. We also know that we also know this right here on your screen, that, you know, for some students, it's especially crucial that we get this right because of what they already know and all of the advantages that some students have. And the truth is, we've really got to learn how to teach more effectively and efficiently. There's not a moment to waste at this time. The clock is ticking, and there are children in our care who need more support than they're being given. And we have to think about those students too as we teach everybody. And so when I think about all of these things together, what we know about working memory, what we know about long-term memory, what we know about the evidence and database for direct and explicit instruction, that our best bet is really to focus more on this, more on the core of how do we get kids learning and being successful in our class with the very short amount of time we have with them. And so that's my talk. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you tuning in. I think we can open it up. Is that right, Paco, for some questions?
Sure. Yes, yes, yes. I think we are ready to shoot. Bravo, Zach. Thank you very much for this. It was amazing. That's a lot of information in a in a very little period of time. But I think we are ready to try to know more things. Bueno, ¿quién se anima? ¿Quiénes? ¿Podéis ir levantando la mano? O directamente así, o por abajo tenéis el botón de reaccionar y lanzamos las preguntas. La podéis hacer en castellano y se la traduzco. Si directamente os animáis con el inglés, adelante. ¿Quién se anima?
Venga.
Reinaldo.
Break the ice, ¿se me escucha, Paco?
Sí.
Sí, 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 adelante.
I would like to speak in English, but right now I am learning English. I'm terrible sorry. But I have Paco, no? Translate, Paco. Bueno, para empezar, congratulations, Professor Thatch. I think a great explanation. I would like a question. Paco, en cuanto al ejemplo que ponía, me gusta mucho de la capital, ¿no? Capital of Sudan, ¿no? En el que dejaba, si he entendido bien, un espacio, ¿no? Para que todo el alumnado pensase y tuviese esa oportunidad de poder responder. Claro, yo me voy a primaria, quizás a etapas más pequeñitas. Yo entiendo que esto previamente tiene un trabajo de gestión de aula, es decir, porque siempre los más rápidos o aventajados, ¿no? Quizás a lo mejor interrumpan y den la respuesta previa o cuchicheen entre ellos y te digan, pues no sé qué, la capital es tal. ¿Qué opina, no, el profesor Zas? O sea, ¿cómo gestiona ese tipo de situaciones en el aula? Muchas gracias.
Yeah, and I'll respond in English. I'm so sorry, but basically your question is, how do you make sure that you teach the kids to wait? We give them some space, like you said, between the question and then their answer, and you're very careful. But you have some students who blurt out, interrupt. They're so enthusiastic that they sometimes just like ruin the opportunity for everybody else to think about the material. And so really it comes down to your routines. When I'm teaching anything in my classroom, I say ahead of time, so I'm going to ask some questions and we're not going to blurt out until I put my hand down, or I will be the one calling and you will not respond before I do it. There's still kids that get very excited at these opportunities and they want to do this. I call those sins of enthusiasm, right? They're just so excited and they just wanted to. You have to train the whole class to not do those things early at the beginning of the year. I do a thing with points where I have a point system and I say, we're going to ask some questions. You're going to wait until I drop my hand. Go. There you go. There's a point. Good job, class. And I'm teaching them to with younger children, teaching them like the norms of how to interact in a classroom. And after about a month or so of practice this way, I typically can get a lot of good engaged behavior in the classroom around this. But you have to teach these things. You spend your first few weeks in the year practicing how do you respond? How do you use your mini whiteboards? How do we interact? Otherwise, we're not going to have a very organized classroom, you know? So yeah.
I think, Zach, that year in Cardiff worked out very well for you because you understood perfectly well his question.
But I speak Andalou is the problem. I speak the southern dialect of yeah.
But Antonio Ivan is from the south. That's why you
Oh
understood.
yeah.
Okay, Reinaldo.
Sí, simplemente quería comentar que se parece tremendamente esta instrucción explícita, tremendamente a lo que vienen haciendo los profesores tradicionales toda su vida, que es preparar las clases con mucho mimo, poner muchos ejemplos y tener un control de la clase, pues poco más o menos que con mucho feedback. Bueno, que realmente es curioso cómo finalmente vamos a ver, los profesores buenos de toda la vida, digamos, siempre se han apoyado en ese tipo de estrategias.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Did you get the whole idea, Zach?
Yeah, was it a question or more like just praise?
No, it was, yes. It was like for Ronaldo, it's like all the things you said. Like it's like traditional what traditionally teachers did in the past. You know, like you prepare very carefully your lessons, so you do responsive teaching according to what students show you. Then they know like I think I would add that it's in what point of the teaching development programs we decided to think that this is not good, you know.
Yeah. Let me show you. Let me show you this. This is today on Twitter. Let's see if I can find it real quickly. You can see that. Look at this. Ready? I'll find it really quickly. Where is it? This is on my Twitter. Ha ha ha. Here we go. Look at this is I saw this today. I'll show you this. All right. See if I can zoom in. Zoom in. Well, look. Down here is boring teaching. Oh, so boring, right? This is so terrible. And then what they're saying here on Twitter is that you should try to go up here and you should try your best. And finally, all the kids are standing up and everybody's doing all this extra learning. And you just say, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. And you know that because you know that students deserve really carefully precise, structured teaching from a teacher who knows how to teach. And this up here is just going to end up with students not really understanding the material, but they're going to be talking about a lot of things they don't understand. It's just so funny to me, like, oh, how boring. But really, my classroom was really a combination of these two right here. It's just a combination of a lot of teaching and a lot of practice. And all this other stuff is just nonsense in my view. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay. Next one. Let me see what the boss is saying. Is it?
Oh, yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. I know. I thought if you could just read it and then I could talk, it would be easier. So I hope you appreciated that.
Adelante, Alba. No, estás mutada.
¿Ahora?
Perfecto.
I'm going to say it in English. It's fine for me. One of the things I've always thought, well, first of all, I wanted to congratulate Zach for his presentation. It was really amazing. And one of the things is that I've always thought that common sense is a flower that doesn't grow in everyone's garden. So maybe for us, it's just like common sense, but not for everyone. I've been teaching for 20 years. I've made this year. Most of it in primary school, teaching how to read and how to write to small children. And one of the things that really works out for me is, for example, I like to use visuals, but I not use not only like I like to use like the chalk blackboard. I know it's like a kind of oldie, but it works for me because it gives me like the time to explain them like to a different speed that it would be with a video or something that maybe someone else prepared or got ready for it, and maybe it's like too stimulating for them. So that's one of the things that worked for me. And it's what Reynaldo said too. It's like the way we've been taught. We've learned a lot, and just it's not only for kids, but for example, when we as adults we need to find a tutorial for something we need to learn, we look for the right instructions on how to do it, and we're not try to solve it just by discovery, maybe because it might break or whatever, if it's technology or whatever. So I think it's not only for kids but for grown-ups too.
Right. And like you said there at the end, what we do as adults is we gravitate towards YouTube videos and our neighbor and my father-in-law, and we use resources around us to teach us things. And it would always be better if we had someone there to teach us there explicitly and properly, but we have to rely on discovery sometimes, and it's usually what makes it so that most adults don't learn new skills. They give up. It's frustrating. How many of us have taught ourselves a language or the piano? We don't do that because it's a lot of work, and we don't have a teacher who can break it down for us. And so it's very true that what you just said. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alba. Andrés o Patricio, ¿queréis preguntar algo? ¿Comentar algo? Okay. In the meantime, I would like to say something. It's like just listening to your presentation and reading your book. It was a little bit overwhelming, like you said before, like good materials must be ready for the teachers to use them, because for example, for the first point, like you need to explain with clarity, you need to prepare very well what you are going to say, what you shouldn't say, not to overwhelm the cognitive load of the students. And then you need to prepare your examples, your non-examples. Like it looks like too much, especially, I don't know in the USA, but in Spain we have a lot of paperwork to do, useless, completely useless sometimes, and it's stealing us this precious time that we need to plan the lessons well, so how to balance this important time that you need to dedicate to planning with all the other extra load of work that it's not important, but we are required to do. So it's like a big challenge and frustration for us.
Yeah. And then you think of the teachers of the youngest students, they have to plan reading, writing, spelling, science, social studies, and math all in one day, right? And I just remember when I was, do I have it here? Yeah. When I was teaching, they gave me this resource, which you can't see. Oof. They gave me this resource that was just for teaching spelling, and it was very deliberate and direct and explicit. And I now have 15 minutes of teaching because it was just spelling all covered for me. I just need to come and present a really great spelling lesson. I could focus my attention on the other parts that I'm teaching. This area of instructional materials that are very systematic is a thing that I think is very important for teachers as we adopt better forms of teaching.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you have any any ideas why all these approaches to teaching, like that, they are not based on evidence? Why are they so popular in the mainstream? I don't know, like the way all the things that you said here, they are rarely taught in the teaching programs. You know, at least the teaching I receive. I don't know the other people here, but I've never heard about the cognitive load. You know, I never heard before about project follow through. I never heard about retrieval practice, space practice, and now because I'm curious and I want to improve my practice, I'm reading all these things, for example, from your book. But this is not in the programs to teach teachers. You know, why is that? So it's
I
so
mean,
difficult to understand.
it's this, and it's the same. Like it's always you always people always want more. There's this feeling of innovation and trying new things, and you talk to parents and it's the same thing. They want their child to do really fun stuff at school that's really exploratory until their child shows any sign of failing like how to read or how to do math, and all of a sudden the parent changes and goes, we need more time being explicitly taught. Parents all over America buy these home programs to teach their child, so because their child is falling behind. We always just decide that the first thing you should do is allow kids to play and discover, and then if there's a problem, we go ahead and we teach them directly. How about we start with what works first, the evidence-based approach first, and then from there we can take a different tactic or technique when kids already know the material. The We have it kind of upside down. Let's start with the least effective approach and then fix the problem later with the more effective approach. We need to start with the more effective approach, if that makes sense.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. It looks like you made it everything very clear. So, is there anything else, you guys? ¿Algo más que queráis preguntarle a Zach? Si no, pues le dejaremos libre ya.
Paco,
Ujú. Adelante.
eh, me vas a tener que hacer de traductor, Paco.
Ningún problema.
Eh,
Intentaré hacer lo mejor que pueda.
yo, en primer lugar, a Sach, darle las gracias. Y luego, eh, perdón, sí,
Entrecorta un poco.
contando con lo que decía Reinaldo, ¿a qué llamamos innovación? ¿De cuántas maneras se puede nombrar la innovación? Para decir lo obvio, y por tanto nos enfrentamos. Para decir lo obvio, y yo creo que hay una cuestión evidentemente relacionada con el poder, ¿no? No es tanto qué significan las palabras, sino efectivamente quién las dice. Entonces me gustaría saber cómo está en Washington o en Estados Unidos el tema de las nuevas pedagogías y cuánto de presión.
La última parte no te he entendido. ¿Quieres decir más o menos cómo está lo de las nuevas metodologías en Estados Unidos? Y al final se ha cortado. Se entrecorta. ¿Vosotros lo escucháis, compañeros?
No, es el sonido de Francisco que, Patricio, no se te ha escuchado bien, se te ha escuchado entrecortado.
¿Qué margen hay aparte de la labor individual?
no he escuchado. Voy a preguntarle a Zach la primera parte, que la he entendido, y si quieres, Francisco, me puedes poner en el chat la pregunta. Yo creo que será mejor. ¿Vale?
Creo que
Así
la
que,
segunda parte iba más por la presión de si allí tienen la presión que
¿Se me
podamos
escucha?
tener nosotros en cuanto a innovación y metodologías nuevas, etcétera, etcétera. Me parece, ¿eh?
okay. All right, Zach, I think I got it. Okay. So Francisco Patricio is trying well, he wants to know how is the situation in the USA, okay? Because in Spain, the issue we have is that the educational norms, the educational laws, sometimes, well, without the sometimes, many times, force us to teach following certain approaches that are not based on evidence. Okay, so for example, in some parts of Spain, you need to use the DUA, the Universal Learning System. I don't know how to say it in English now. Okay, but or for example, you need to follow the project-based. Okay, things like this, and there's a lot of pressure, and we teachers we are sometimes forced to use these approaches when we plan our lessons. Okay, and he wants to know if the situation is the same in the USA, or you are more independent and you can create your own methods.
Yeah, I mean, we have like a lot of the documents and the suggestions or recommendations uh are not based on evidence, and they're really far away from explicit instruction. But what happens is that teachers have some degree of control of what they do on a day-to-day regular basis, right? And so maybe somebody comes in and observes their lesson, and they put on a show, and they do what they want to do for the observation, and then the minute the observation is over, they just go back to teaching the way that they wanted to teach. And that's good and bad, because in the same way, if I want to train my school in explicit instruction, when I come around, they can go back the other way and do whatever they want when I'm gone, you know? So we have this problem where, number one, our recommendations are not based on evidence. And number two, that we have a culture where we don't really, in many schools, work together around perfecting a certain methodology or creating the school that that we want is very difficult, because we have all these different opinions and views on teaching, and it becomes very difficult to, I don't know, as a teacher, it's frustrating because you can't find the school that you want to work at. As a student or a parent, it's frustrating. You can't find the school that fits with these ideas. And so it's just slowly but surely it's sort of it's becoming more accepted, I think, to teach this way in some small pockets of the United States, and they're kind of just doing it on their own, you know. Yeah.
¿Te traduzco un poco, Francisco Patricio? Más o menos ha venido a decir que, bueno, que es verdad que también existen esas normativas en Estados Unidos, parecidas a las nuestras, y que a veces cuando te vienen a observar en un aula un inspector o un director, pues haces para esa ocasión un teatrillo para que estén contentos, pero luego pues el día a día haces lo que tú crees que funciona. Que bueno, que yo creo que, bueno, al menos hablo por mí, es lo que muchas veces hacemos, ¿no? I always remember, Zach, the day that I did my exam for becoming a civil servant, to become a tenure teacher. One of the parts was to plan a lesson, you know, and I remember I said many things about that lesson that I was sure I was never going to use them in class, but I knew they wanted to read about that, you know, so I gave them that and I passed. So, yeah.
Yeah. Here's a good article I'll put in the chat that I wrote. This is sort of how I approach lesson planning, you know, but I think this is part of it as well, is like, how do you plan a lesson within the constraints that you have? How do you plan an explicit instruction lesson? And so that's a good blog for anyone interested.
Okay, thank you very much. Jack nos ha puesto ahí un link para las programaciones, para cómo planificar las clases. Bastante interesante. Muy bien. ¿Alguna cosa más? Tenemos por ahí a Andrés, que nos ha manifestado. No sé si quiere decir algo.
Hola, no, en principio no, me ha parecido interesante y he estado escuchando todo lo que habéis comentado por ahí. Eh,
Well,
tenía apuntado algo, pero ya has dado la respuesta, ¿no? Que era de dónde
sí,
sacamos el tiempo de dónde sacamos el tiempo los profesores para preparar estos materiales, ¿no? Que no existen, ¿no? Que ya
exacto.
él lo ha comentado que realmente es complicado, ¿no?
Sí, sí, exacto, exacto. Yeah, I wanted to. So you were in Chile in Research Ed.
Yeah, that's right. And
Was
I'm
like a
going to
month ago, right?
no, that a year I didn't go last it was the year before.
Okay.
And I'm going to research at Columbia in a few months. So it's going to be cool.
Cool, 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 cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I don't know if nobody has any more questions. I think on behalf of Asociación Ocre and all my colleagues here, we are very, very grateful. I need to apologize to you because this webinar was planned for September, okay? But something came up. I had the parent-teacher meetings that exact day, that was Murphy's Law, and you have been so generous with us, okay, changing the date. Thank you very much for the presentation. Thank you for spreading all these ideas, which are paramount for improving the children's education, okay? And we are very grateful. So Thanksgiving is around the corner, so we are grateful for having you here. Okay?
Looking forward to it. I'm really, really great. Our Thanksgiving is very Spanish in the sense that we eat and we get together and we stay up. It's our most Spanish holiday is Thanksgiving, I feel like. So there you go.
It was my favorite holiday in the USA.
Yeah. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Zach. Thank you. Take care.
Gracias. Hasta luego.
Gracias a todos.
Muchas gracias. Nos vemos pronto. Hablamos, Paco, Irene. Saludos a todo el mundo.
Chao, chao.
Sara,
Cuídense.
muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a todos por asistir.
Chao, chao.